And I make that the hour, which is a bit of a pickle because the ad breaks haven't ended yet. And I think by the time they do end, it will have ticked over to the minute past the hour. I cannot abide to be tardy, but at the same time I cannot abide to exclude people based on the ad breaks. Quite a conundrum. But I'll make that as the ads haven't ended, so if anyone happened to have missed my initial saying of the I'll make that the hour, I do apologise to you. I mistimed things today, and so the ad breaks ran over the hour. We're a minute late, and I intend to apologise for you most sincerely for it. Now that being done, we've got a few things of business. First off, thank you for lurking wild, I do always appreciate it. But first things first, let's get to thanking Abbe for once again claiming Lamp's favour. And make a note of your lucky number 13. That's a significant number. There we are. Having done that, let's see. Well, as I've said in numerous places, today is of course Tuesday, and so we'll be going back to our Torrid Tuesday tradition or our new Torrid Tuesday tradition of reading romance novels. Specifically, we're going to be carrying on with Emma by Jane Austen. But before we do that, I do of course have to do my little bit of time filling to let people arrive. And having completed sort of my general treatise on the beasts of the library well, I guess yesterday, I suppose today I should be talking to you about something else. And my intention was to begin talking about the sort of cursed objects that happen to be in the library. But it occurred to me that before I could really talk about them, I needed to define in my own mind what is a cursed object. And that weren't as easy as I really kind of wondered. I thought it would be. And so I thought I'd have to get a bit more abstract and sort of define what is a magical object. And that's also not easy. But I've been giving it some thought, and I am with the caveat that Lamp refuses to actually teach me magic, and this is all just stuff that I've inferred from my various dealings over the years with the things around here and from what he's said. I'm going to try and give a general outline of the topic. Now, of course, the first question bit that underlies the idea of what is a magical item is the question of what is magic. And that's an old can of worms in and of itself. I mean, fundamentally, the idea of magic is that it's something that is impossible within the sort of standard understanding of physical laws, right? If something is magical, it means it can't happen. But of course, if that were the case, then it is a useless thing, because the things that do happen here are generally considered under the terms of magic, and they certainly do happen. So while I could posit that they're all actually some sort of unexplained scientific phenomena, I'm not going to bother with that. So for our purposes, magic is something that violates the general laws of reality. That is, the standard things that are allowed to typically happen. Now, how this works is something to do with what Lamp calls consensus reality. And I'm not really entirely clear on the nature of that. It's just a word or a phrase that he says quite frequently. But as best I understand it, all magic is performed in some way by a mind. Has to be conceptualized, right? Kind of, how would you put it? The idea of what is to happen has to be held in some way by some sort of mind in order to be able to act against the sort of standard action, you know? If something is to happen, there must be a will behind it to happen, or the normal laws of reality will assert themselves again. Now, for a wizard practicing magic, this is pretty sort of normal, you know, they've got to keep their spells in their heads. But it means that if you want to make an object magical, in some way or other you need to put a mind inside of it, which has troubling implications, obviously, especially with Lamp, you know, having been a person at one point and now being an object. But most magical objects isn't quite so gruesome as that. The easiest example of sort of the way that a mind or an idea is put into an object is symbolically. So, for example, I'll go to my go-to. If you look down at the bottom here, there's a bunch of different symbols that make up the wall. And they repeat here because there's a pattern of them. But each of those symbols individually sort of relates to a concept or an idea. They're not as concrete as a single word or letter, although sometimes they have been used as them in various systems writing. They kind of relate to a vague concept that is useful in the construction of magical buildings or spells or wards. And by representing that idea symbolically, and having become synonymous with that idea inside a wide enough scope of human understanding, they become emblematic of that idea. So that to produce the symbol is to produce the idea. And so the most basic and common form of the production of these magical items comes in this form. You layer these symbols in a specific sort of manner, such that they interlocked and overlay and come together to create more complex ideas. And then by being the concrete manifestation of these ideas, they hold that idea in the world. They sort of become the mind that manifests its own idea. Now this idea is only the idea that is represented by these symbols, but it gives you a sort of standard of what a mind is. And most objects that are, well, most magical objects are this sort of magical object, right? I mean, obviously this place is full of wards that there's a lot of complexity that goes in on them, but well, essentially the wards that run through this place is all one ward that have like kind of it's almost like a programming language, right? Each symbol interacts and means different things, and the way they interact with one another become more and more complex and sort of develop out. But for an example of a smaller sort of magical object, let's go briefly over here and move slightly up to here. Ooh. And if you see at the far right here, the signal in that book there, that's a magical object as well. Now the way that this object is made magical, which I discovered only after going through it, is also by the application of runes. In this case, someone has painted on the black sort of cover boards of the text in black paint a series of symbols, which I don't understand, but which in and of themselves create a sort of logic, so it becomes a magical object in itself. And that's only part of it, of course, and there are other ways of creating a mind that can conceptualise ideas, but this is the simplest one, and yeah, we're just illustrating the idea here. But other than creating the idea and maintaining it, the other thing that a magical object requires is power, or energy. And the way that energy for magic sort of works is complex. Because obviously, like, there are things that are power in the world, right? There's electricity and motion and that sort of thing. But the power that underlies magic, or that forces magic, isn't like a literal physical power that acts in the world, because magic isn't a physical thing, although it can become physical. The power that underlies magic is a symbolic power, like the way that, like, how'd you put it? The way I think of it is sort of like sacredness, right? Like, some things are powerful symbolically because there are ideas attached to them, right? Like a religious symbol, say the cross, right? A cross isn't a particularly special object in and of itself, it's just two pieces of wood overlaid with each other, or even just two lines. But because of the ideas attached to it and the sort of energy and attention people put into it, it becomes symbolically powerful, right? It has a sort of metaphysical weight to it. And that metaphysical weight, which you're aware of, is the sort of energy we're talking about here. And so in some way, for an object to become powered magically, there needs to be this metaphysical energy attached to it. Now, I'm not as clear on how you do that. Like, as far as I understand, you can't take it from other symbols. Like, you couldn't just put a cross on a book you wanted to be a magic book. You have to sort of some way, I don't know, imprint power on it like that. I think it's something that a trained wizard is able to do, like, manually, but I'm not entirely clear. But in essence, these two sort of things, these two principles, the conceptualization of the idea of an effect, and the weight or importance of an effect, the power of it, are the two things that an object needs to possess to be an object of magic. Now, that's the basic definition of a magical object. But if we need to expand that into a cursed object, or refine, I suppose, into a cursed object, it becomes a little bit more complex. But that's been 10 minutes, so rather than go on about this, we'll pick this up next week, and instead we'll start with our book for the day, which of course is Emma by Jane Austen. First I'll have a quick drink of water, just so I'm good and refreshed. Now, we got through 4 chapters last week, so we've been picking up at chapter 5. But to give a basic summary, Emma is a young woman who's the younger daughter of a country gentleman, Her long-time companion and maid from childhood, who sort of just became a regular companion, has recently remarried and left the house. And it's caused quite an upset, but Emma has decided that she is a skilled matchmaker, claiming responsibility for the marriage, which was a good one. And so she is intending to find a husband, well not a husband, a match for another person in the village, I believe it's the priest. And she has taken under her wing a young woman of illegitimate descendant from a gentleman who she is attempting to make a match with. And that's about where we left off. As always, before I start, I will say, if at any point you missed something, either because I've skipped over it or read it badly, or there's been some technical interference or anything, let me know and I'm happy to go back over it. If you have thoughts, comments, questions, I'm always happy to hear them. If any reason, feel free to let me know, I'm always happy to have a chat. But other than that, unless anyone has any questions pressingly, then without any further ado, I shall begin. Chapter 5. I do not know what your opinion may be, Mrs. Weston, said Mr. Knightley, of this great intimacy between Emma and Harriet Smith, but I think it a bad thing. A bad thing? Do you really think it a bad thing? Why so? I think they will neither of them do the other any good. You surprise me. Emma must do Harriet good. And by supplying her with a new object of interest, Harriet may be said to do Emma good. I have been seeing their intimacy with the greatest pleasure. How very differently we feel. I don't think they will do each other any good. This will certainly be the beginning of one of our quarrels about Emma, Mr. Knightley. Perhaps you think I am come on purpose to quarrel with you, knowing Weston to be out, and that you must still fight your own battle. Mr. Weston would undoubtedly support me if he were here, but he thinks exactly as I do on the subject. We were speaking of it only yesterday, and agreeing how fortunate it was for Emma that there should be such a girl in Highbury for her to associate with. Mr. Knightley, I shall not allow you to be a fair judge in this case. You are so much used to live alone that you do not know the value of a companion, and perhaps no man can be a good judge of the comfort of a woman feels in the society of one of her own sex after being used to it all her life. I can imagine your objection to Harriet Smith. She is not the superior young woman which Emma's friend ought to be, but on the other hand, as Emma wants to see her better informed, it will be an inducement to her to read more herself. They will read together. She means it, I know. Emma has been meaning to read more ever since she was 12 years old. I have seen a great many lists of her drawing up at various times books she meant to read regularly through, and very good lists they were, very well chosen and very neatly arranged, sometimes alphabetically, and sometimes by some other rule. The list she drew up when only 14, I remember thinking it did her judgment so much credit that I preserved it some time, and I dare say she may have made out a very good list now, but I have done with expecting any course of steady reading from Emma. She will never submit to anything requiring industry and patience, and a subjection of the fancy to the understanding. Where Miss Taylor failed to stimulate, I may safely affirm that Harriet Smith will do nothing. You could never persuade her to read half so much as you wished. You know you could not. I dare say, replied Miss Weston, smiling, that I thought so then, but since we have parted, I can never remember Emma's omitting to do anything I wished. There is hardly any desiring to refresh such a memory as that, said Mr. Knightley feelingly. And for a moment or two he had done. But I, he soon added, who have had no such charm thrown over my senses, must still see, hear, and remember. Emma is spoiled by being the cleverest of her family. At 10 years old, she had the misfortune of being able to answer questions which puzzled her sister at 17. She was always quick and assured, Isabella slow and diffident. But ever since she was 12, Emma has been mistress of the house and of you all. In her mother she lost the only person able to cope with her. She inherits her mother's talents, and must have been under subjection to her. I should have been sorry, Mr. Knightley, to be so dependent on your recommendation, had I quitted Mr. Woodhouse's family and wanted another situation. I do not think you would have spoken a good word for me to anybody. I am sure you always thought me unfit for the office I held. Yes, he said, smiling. You are better placed here. Very fit for a wife, but not at all for a governess. When you were preparing yourself to be an excellent wife all the time you were in Hartfield, you might not give Emma such a complete education as your powers would seem to promise, but you were receiving a very good education from her on the very material matrimonial point of submitting your own will and doing as you were bid. And if Weston had asked me to recommend him a wife, I should certainly have named Miss Taylor. Thank you. There will be very little merit in making a good wife to such a man as Mr. Weston. Why, to own the truth, I am afraid you are rather thrown away, and with every disposition to bear, there will be nothing to be borne. We will not despair, however. Weston may grow cross from the wantonness of comfort, or his son may plague him. I hope not that. It is not likely. No, Mr. Knightley, do not foretell vexation from that quarter. Not I. Indeed, I only name possibilities. I do not pretend to Emma's genius for foretelling and guessing. I hope, with all my heart, the young man may be a Weston in merit, and a Churchill in fortune. But Harriet Smith, I have not half done about Harriet Smith. I think her the very worst sort of companion that Emma could possibly have. She knows nothing herself, and looks upon Emma as knowing everything. She is a flatterer in all her ways, and so much the worse because undesigned. Her ignorance is hourly flattery. How can Emma imagine she has anything to learn herself, while Harriet is presenting such a delightful inferiority? And as for Harriet, I will venture to say that she cannot gain by acquaintance. Hartford will only put her out of conceit with all other places she belongs to. She will grow just refined enough to be uncomfortable with those among whose birth and circumstance have placed her home. I am much mistaken if Emma's doctrines give any strength of mind, or tend at all to make a girl adapt herself rationally to the varieties of her situation in life. They only give a little polish. I either depend more upon Emma's good sense than you do, or am more anxious for her present comfort, for I cannot lament the acquaintance. How well she looked last night! Oh, you would rather talk of her person than her mind, would you? Very well. I shall not attempt to deny Emma's being pretty. Pretty? Say beautiful, rather. Can you imagine anything nearer perfect beauty than Emma altogether, face and figure? I do not know what I could imagine, but I confess that I have seldom seen a face or figure more pleasing to me than hers. But I am a partial old friend. Such an eye, a true hazel eye, and so brilliant. Regular features, open countenance with a complexion. Oh, what a bloom of full health, and such a pretty height and size, such a firm and upright figure. There is health, not merely in her bloom, but in her air, her head, her glance. One hears sometimes of a child being the picture of health. Now Emma almost gives me the idea of being the complete picture of a grown-up health. She is loveliness itself, Mr. Knightley, is not she? I have not a fault to find with her person, he replied. I think her all you describe. I love to look at her, and will add this praise, that I do not think her personality vain, or not personally vain. Considering how very handsome she is, she appears to be little occupied with it. Her vanity lies another way. Mrs. Weston, I am not to be talked out of my dislike for her intimacy with Harriet Smith, or my dread of its doing them both harm. And I, Mr. Knightley, am equally stout in my confidence of its not doing them any harm. With all dear Emma's little faults, she is an excellent creature. Where shall we see a better daughter, or a kinder sister, or a truer friend? No, she has such qualities which may be trusted. She will never lead anyone really wrong. She will make no lasting blunder. Where Emma errs once, she is in the right 100 times. Very well. I will not plague you any more. Emma shall be an angel, and I will keep my spleen to myself till Christmas brings John and Isabella. John loves Emma with a reasonable and therefore not a blind affection, and Isabella always thinks as he does, except when he is not quite frightened enough about the children. I am sure of having their opinions with me. I know that you will love her really too well to be unjust and unkind. But excuse me, Mr. Knightley, if I take the liberty, I consider myself, you know, as having somewhat of the privilege of speech that Emma's mother might have had, the liberty of hinting that I do not think any possible good can arise from Harriet Smith's intimacy being a matter of much discussion among you. Pray excuse me, but supposing any little inconvenience may be apprehended from the intimacy, it cannot be expected that Emma, accountable to nobody her father, who perfectly approves the acquaintance, should put an end to it, so long as it is a source of pleasure to herself. It has been so many years my province gave to give advice that you cannot be surprised, Mr. Knightley, at this little remains of office. Not at all, cried he. I am much obliged to you for it. It is very good advice, and it shall have a better fate than your advice has often found. It shall be attended to. Mrs. John Knightley is easily alarmed, and might be made unhappy about her sister. Be satisfied, said he. I will not raise any outcry. I will keep my ill humour to myself. I have a very sincere interest in Emma. Isabella does not seem more my sister, has never excited a greater interest, perhaps hardly so great. There is an anxiety, a curiosity in what one feels for Emma. I wonder what will become of her. So do I, said Mr. Weston gently. Very much. She always declares she will never marry, which of course means just nothing at all. But I have no idea that she has yet ever seen a man she cared for. It would not be a bad thing for her to be very much in love with a proper object. I should like to see Emma in love, and in some doubt of return. It would do her good. There is nobody hereabouts to attach her, and she goes so seldom from home. It does indeed seem as little to tempt her to break her resolution at present, said Mrs. Weston, as can well be. And while she is so happy at Hartfield, I cannot wish her to be forming any attachments which would be creating such difficulties on poor Mr. Woodhouse's account. I do not recommend matrimony at present to Emma, though I mean no slight to the state, I assure you. Part of her meaning will conceal some favourite thought of her own, and Mr. Weston's on the subject, as much as possible. There were wishes at Randall's respecting Emma's destiny, but it were not desirable to have them suspected. The quiet transition which Mr. Knightley soon afterwards made to "What does Weston think of the weather, that we shall have rain?" convinced her that he had nothing more to say or surmise about Hartfield. That's the end of chapter 5. I'll have a quick swallow of water. So Knightley foresees ill. And I wonder if maybe he has a thing for Emma, the way he talks about her. I'm not sure exactly though. And of course Mrs. Weston, wishes her the best and don't see any harm in it. There is much else to say on the chapter, so we'll press on. Emma could not feel a doubt of having given Harriet's fancy a proper direction, and raised the gratitude of her young vanity to a very good purpose, but she found it decidedly more sensible than before of Mr. Elton's being a remarkably handsome young man, with most agreeable manners, and as she had no hesitation in following up the assurances of his admiration by agreeable hints, she was soon pretty confident of creating as much liking on Harriet's side as there could be any occasion for. She was quite convinced that Mr. Elton's being in the fairest way of falling in love, if not in love already. She had no scruple with regard to him. He talked of Harriet, and praised her so warmly that she could not suppose anything wanting which a little time would not add. His perceptions of the striking improvement of Harriet's manner since her introduction at Hartfield were not one of the least agreeable proofs of his growing attachment. "You have given Miss Smith all that she requested, or that she required," said he. "You have made her graceful and easy. She was a beautiful creature when she came to you, but in my opinion, The attractions you have added are infinitely superior to what you received from nature. I am so glad you think I have been useful to her. But Harriet only wanted drawing out and receiving a few, very few hints. She had all the natural grace of a sweetness of temper and artlessness in herself. I have done very little. If it were admissible to contradict a lady, said the gallant Mr. Elton, I have perhaps given her a little more decision of character, or taught her to think on points which had not fallen in her way before. Exactly so. That is what principally strikes me. So much superadded decision of character. Skilful has been the hand. Great has been the pleasure. I am sure I never met with a disposition more truly amiable. I have no doubt of it. And it was spoken with a sort of sigh and animation which had a vast deal of the lover. She was not less pleased another day with the manner in which she seconded a sudden wish of hers to have Harriet's picture. Did you ever have your likeness taken, Harriet? She said. Did you ever sit for your picture? Harriet were on the point of leaving the room, and only stopped to say, with a very interested naivety, "Oh, dear no, never." No sooner was she out of sight than Emma exclaimed, What an exquisite possession of good picture! What an exquisite possession a good picture of her would be! I would give any money for it. I almost long to attempt her likeness myself. You do not know how I dare say, but 2 or 3 years ago I had a great passion for taking likenesses, and attempted several of my friends, and was thought to have a tolerable eye in general, but from one cause or another I gave it up in disgust. But really I could almost venture it if Harriet would sit to me. It would be a delight to have her picture. Let me entreat you, cried Mr. Upton. It would indeed be a delight. Let me entreat you, Miss Woodhouse, to exercise so charming a talent in favour of your friend. I know what your drawings are. How could you suppose me ignorant? Is not this room rich in specimens of your landscapes and flowers? And is not Mrs. Weston some inimitable figure pieces in her drawing-room at Randall's? Yes, good man, thought Emma. But what has all that to do with taking likenesses? You know nothing of drawing. Don't pretend to be in rapture about mine. Keep your rapture for Harriet's face. Well, if you give me such kind encouragement, Mr. Elton, I believe I shall try what I can do. Harriet's features are very delicate, which makes a likeness difficult. And yet there is a peculiarity in the shape of the eye and the lines about the mouth, which one ought to catch. Exactly so. The shape of the eye and the lines about the mouth. I have not a doubt of your success. Pray, attempt it. As you will do it, it will indeed, to use your own words, be an exquisite possession. But I am afraid, Mr. Elton, Harriet will not like to sit. She thinks so little of her own beauty. Did you not observe her manner of answering me? How completely it meant, why should my picture be drawn? Oh yes, I observed it, and I assure you it was not lost on me. But still, I cannot imagine she would not be persuaded. Harriet was soon back again, the proposal almost immediately made, and she had no scruple which could stand many minutes against the earnest pressing of both the others. Emma wished to go to work directly, and therefore produced the portfolio containing her various attempts at portraits, but not one of them had ever been finished. They might decide together upon the best stars for Harriet. Her many beginnings were displayed. Miniatures, half-lengths, whole-lengths, pencil, crayon and watercolours had all been tried in turn. She had always wanted to do everything, and had made more progress both in drawing and music than many might have done with so little labour as she would ever submit to. She played and sang, and drew in almost every style, but steadiness had always been wanting, and in nothing had she approached the degree of excellence which she would have been glad to command, and ought not to have failed of. She was not much deceived as to her own skill either, as an artist or a musician, but she was not unwilling to have others deceived, or sorry to know her reputation for accomplishment often higher than it deserved. There were merit in every drawing, in the least finished perhaps the most. Her style was spirited. Had there been much less, or had there been 10 times more, the delight and admiration of her 2 companions would have been the same. They was both in ecstasies. A likeness pleases everybody, and Miss Woodhouse's performance must be capital. No great variety of faces for you, said Emma. I had only my own family to study from. There is my father, another of my father, but the idea of sitting for his picture made him so nervous that I could only take him by stealth. Neither of them very like, therefore. Mrs. Weston again, and again, and again, you see. Dear Mrs. Weston, almost my kindest friend on every occasion. She would sit whenever I would ask her. There is my sister, and really quite her own little elegant figure. And the face not unlike. I should have made a good likeness of her, if she would have sat longer. She was always in such a hurry to have me draw her 4 children that she would not be quiet. Then here comes all my attempts at three of those 4 children. There they are, Henry and John and Bella, from one end of the sheet to the other, and any one of them might do for any one of the rest. She was so eager to have them drawn that I could not refuse. There is no making children of 3 or 4 years stand still, you know. Nor can it be very easy to take any likeness of them beyond the air and complexion, unless they are coarser featured than any mamma's children ever were. Here is my sketch of the 4th, who was a baby. I took him as he was sleeping on the sofa, and it is as strong a likeness of his cockade as you would wish to see. He had nested down his head most conveniently. That's very like. I'm rather proud of little George. The corner of the sofa is very good. Then here is my last. I'm closing a pretty sketch of a gentleman in small size, whole length. My last and my best. My brother, Mr. John Knightley. This did not want much of being finished when I put it away. When I put it away in a pet, and vowed I would never take another likeness. I couldn't help being provoked. But after all my pains, and when I really made a very good likeness of it, Mrs. Weston and I were quite agreed in thinking it very like, only too handsome, too flattering. That was a fault on the right side. After all this came poor dear Isabella's cold approbation of it. Yes, it was a little like, but to be sure it did not do him justice. We had a great deal of trouble in persuading him to sit at all. It was made a great favour of, and altogether it was more than I could bear, and so I never would finish it, to have it apologised over as unfavourable likeness to every morning visitor in Brunswick Square. And as I said, I did then forswear ever drawing anybody again. For Harriet's sake, or rather for my own, and as there are no husbands and wives in the case at present, I will break my resolution now. Mr. Elton seemed very properly struck and delighted by the idea, and repeating, "No husbands and wives in the case at present, indeed, as you observe." "Exactly so. No husbands and wives." I was so interested in her consciousness that Emma began to consider whether she had not be better leave them together at once. But as she wanted to be drawing, the declaration must last a little longer. She had soon fixed on the size and sort of portrait. It were to be an old length in watercolours, like Mr. John Knightley's, and were destined, if she could please herself, to hold a very honourable station over the mantelpiece. The sitting begun, and Harriet, smiling and blushing, I'm afraid of not keeping her attitude and countenance, presented a very sweet mixture of youthful expression and the steady eyes of the artist. There were no doing anything with Mr. Elton fidgeting behind her and watching every touch. She gave him credit for stationing himself where he might gaze and gaze again without offence, but were really obliged to put an end to it and request him to place himself elsewhere. It then occurred that we would employ him in reading. If he would be so good as to read to them, it would be a kindness indeed. It would amuse away the difference of her part and lessen the irksomeness of Miss Smith's. Mr. Elton were only too happy. Harriet listened, and Emma drew in peace. She must allow him to be still frequently coming to look. Anything less would certainly have been too little in a lover, and he were ready at the smallest intermission of the pencil to jump up and see the progress and be charmed. There were no being displeased with such an encourager, for his admiration made him discern a likeness almost before it were possible. She could not respect his art, but his love and his complacence were unexceptionable. The sitting were altogether very satisfactory. She were quite enough pleased with the first day's sketch to wish to go on. There were no want of lightness, she'd been fortunate in the attitude, and she meant to throw in a little improvement to the figure to give a little more art and considerably more elegance. She had great confidence of it being in every way a pretty drawing at last, and of its filing to its destined place would credit them both. A standing memorial of the beauty of one, the skill of the other, and the friendship of both. With many other agreeable associations, as Mr. Elton's very promising attachment were likely to add. Harriet would have sit again the next day, and Mr. Elton, just as he ought, entreated for the permission of attending and reading to them again. By all means, I should be most happy to consider you as one of the party. The same civilities and courtesies, the same success and satisfaction took place on the morrow, and accompanied the old progress of the picture, which were rapid and happy. Everybody who saw it were pleased, but Mr. Elton were in continual raptures, and defended it through every criticism. Miss Woodhouse has given her friend the only beauty she wanted, observed Mr. Weston Wynne, not in the least suspecting that she were addressing a lover. The expression of the eye is most correct, but Miss Smith has not the eye. But Miss Smith has not the eyebrows and the eyelashes. It is the fault of her face that she has them not. Do you think so? Replied he. I cannot agree with you. It appears to me a most perfect resemblance in every feature. I never saw such a likeness in my life. You must allow for the effect of shade, you know. You've made it too tall, Emma, said Mr. Knightley. Emma knew that she had, but would not own to it. Mr. Elton warmly added, Oh no, certainly not too tall. Not in the least too tall. Consider she is sitting down, which naturally presents a different, which in short gives exactly the idea, and the proportions must be preserved, you know. Proportions, foreshortening. Oh no, it gives one exactly the idea of such a height as Miss Smith's. Exactly, so indeed. It is very pretty, said Mr. Woodhouse. So prettily done. Just as your drawings always are, my dear. I do not know anybody who draws as well as you do. The only thing I do not thoroughly like is that she seems to be sitting out of doors, with only a little shawl over her shoulders. It makes one think she must catch cold. But my dear papa, it is supposed to be summer, a warm day in summer. Look at the tree. But it is never safe to sit out of doors, my dear. You, sir, may say anything, cried Mr. Elton. But I must confess that I regard it as a most happy thought, the placing of Miss Smith out of doors, and the tree is touched with such inimitable spirit. Any other situation would have been much less in character. The naivete of Miss Smith's manner, and altogether, how it is most admirable. I cannot keep my eyes from it. I never saw such a likeness. The next thing wanted were to get the picture framed, and here were a few difficulties. It must be done directly, it must be done in London. The order must go through the hands of some intelligent person whose taste could be depended on, and Isabella, the usual doer of all commissions, must not be applied to, because it were December, and Mr. Woodhouse could not bear the idea of her stirring out of her house in the fogs of December. But no sooner were the distress known to Mr. Elton than they were removed. His gallantry were always on the alert. Might he be trusted with a commission? What? No worries, what? Might he be trusted with a commission? What infinite pleasure should he have in executing it? He could ride to London at any time. It were impossible to say how much he should be gratified by being employed on such an errand. He was too good. She could not endure the thought. She would not give him such troublesome office for the world. Brought on the desirable repetition of entreaties and assurances, and a very few minutes settled the business. Mr. Elton would take the drawing to London, choose the frame, and give the directions, and Emma thought she could so pack it as to ensure its safety without much incommoding him, while he seemed mostly fearful of not being incommoded enough. What a precious deposit! What a precious deposit, said he with a tender sigh as he received it. This man is almost too gallant to be in love, thought Emma. I should say so, but that I suppose there might be 100 different ways of being in love. He's an excellent young man, and will suit Harriet exactly. It will be exactly so, as he says himself. But he does just sigh and languish, and study for compliments rather more than I could endure as a principle. I go in for a pretty good share as a second, but it is his gratitude on Harriet's account. And that's the end of chapter 6. Feel like I stumbled over some of that, but have a cool drink of water. Well then, so the courtship by all appearance does appear to be proceeding well. Mr. Elton is duly admiring of the portrait of Harriet, and seems to like her well enough. Although Emma is the one doing all the interaction. And indeed, in some ways, he appears more wrapped around Emma's finger than he does Harriet's. So, we shall see how things work out. Dear Lord, I've got a bit of a burr in my throat there. Oh, another quick drink of water and then we'll press on. Chapter 7. The very day Mr. Elton's gone to London produced a fresh occasion for Emma's services towards her friend. Harriet had been at Artfield, as usual, soon after breakfast, and after a time had gone home to return again to dinner. She received, and sooner than had been talked of, and with an agitated, hurried look, announced something extraordinary to have happened, which she were longing to tell. Half a minute brought it all out. She had heard, as soon as she got back to Mrs. Goddard's, that Mr. Martin had been there an hour before, and finding she were not at home, not particularly expected, had left a little parcel for her from one of his sisters and gone away. And on opening the parcel, she had actually found, beside the 2 songs which she had lent Elizabeth to copy, a letter to herself. And this letter was from him, from Mr. Martin, and contained a direct proposal of marriage. Who could have thought it? She was so surprised she did not know what to do. Yes, quite a proposal of marriage. A very good letter, at least she thought so. And he wrote as if he really loved her very much, but she did not know. And so she would come as fast as she could to ask Miss Woodhouse what she should do. Emma were half ashamed of her friend for seeming so pleased and so doubtful. "Upon my word," she cried, "the young man is determined not to lose anything for want of asking. He will connect himself well if he can." "Will you read the letter?" cried Harriet. "Pray do. I'd rather you would." Emma were not sorry to be pressed. She read, and was surprised. The style of the letter was much above her expectation. There were not merely no grammatical errors, but as a composition it would not have disgraced a gentleman. The language, though plain, was strong and unaffected, and the sentiments it conveyed very much to the credit of the writer. It was short, but expressed good sense, warm attachment, liberality, propriety, even delicacy of feeling. She paused over it while Harriet stood anxiously, watching for opinion with well, and were at last forced to add, "Is it a good letter, or is it too short?" "Yes, indeed, a very good letter," replied Emma rather slowly. "So good a letter, Harriet, that everything considered, I think one of his sisters must have helped him. I can hardly imagine the young man whom I saw talking with you the other day could express himself so well, if left quite to his own powers. And yet it is not the style of a woman. No, certainly it is too strong and concise, not diffuse enough for a woman. No doubt he is a sensible man, and I suppose may have a natural talent for think strongly and clearly, and when he takes a pen in hand, his thoughts naturally find proper words. It is so with some men. Yes, I understand the sort of mind. Vigorous, decided with sentiments to a certain point, not coarse. A better written letter, Harriet, returning it, than I had expected." "Well," said the still waiting Harriet. "Well, and what shall I do?" "What shall you do? In what respect? You mean with regards to this letter?" "Yes." "But what are you in doubt of?" "You must answer it, of course, and speedily." "Yes, but what shall I say?" "Dear Miss Woodhouse, do advise me." "Oh, no, no. The letter had much better be all your own. You will express yourself very properly, I'm sure. There's no danger of your not being intelligible, which is the first thing. Your meaning must be unequivocal, no doubts or demurs, and such expressions of gratitude and concern for the pain you're inflicting on the inflicting as propriety requires, will present themselves unbidden to your mind. I am persuaded you need not be prompted to write with the appearance of sorrow for his disappointment. You think I ought to refuse him, then? You think I ought to refuse him, then? Said Harriet, looking down. Ought to refuse him? My dear Harriet, what do you mean? Are you in any doubt as to that? I thought, but I beg your pardon, perhaps I have been under a mistake. I certainly have been misunderstanding you, if in doubt to the purpose of your answer. I had imagined you were merely consulting me as to the wording of it. Harriet was silent. With a little reserve of manner, Emma continued. You mean to return a favourable answer, I collect? No, I do not. That is, I do not mean... What shall I do? What would you advise me to do? Pray, dear Miss Woodhouse, tell me what I ought to do. I shall not give you any advice, Harriet. I will have nothing to do with it. This is a point which you must settle with your own feelings. I had no notion that he liked me so very much, said Harriet, contemplating the letter. For a little while Emma persevered in this silence, but beginning to apprehend the bewitching flattery of that letter might be too powerful, she thought it best to say, I laid down as a general rule, Harriet, that if a woman doubts as to whether she should accept a man or not, she certainly ought to refuse him. If she can hesitate to do so, if she can hesitate as to yes, she ought to say no directly. It is not a state to be safely entered into with doubtful feelings, with half a heart. I thought it my duty as a friend, older than yourself, to say thus much to you. I do not imagine that I want to influence you. Oh, no, I am sure you are a great deal too kind to. But if you would just advise me what I had best do. No, I do not mean that. As you say, one's mind ought to be quite made up. One should not be hesitating. It is a very serious thing. It will be safe to say no, perhaps. Do you think I had better say no? Not for the world, said Emma, smiling graciously. But I advise you either way. You must be the best judge of your own happiness. If you prefer Mr. Martin to every other person, if you think him the most agreeable man you have ever been in company with, why should you hesitate? You blush, Harriet. Does anybody else occur to you at this moment under such a definition? Harriet, do not deceive yourself. Do not be run away with by gratitude and compassion. At this moment, who are you thinking of? The symptoms were favourable. Instead of answering, Harriet turned away, confused, and stood thoughtfully by the fire. And though the letter was still in her hand, it was now mechanically twisted about without regard. Emma waited the result with impatience, but not without strong hopes. At last, with some hesitation, Harriet said, Miss Woodhouse, as you will not give me your opinion, I must do as well as I can by myself. And I have now quite determined, and really almost made up my mind, to refuse Mr. Martin. Do you think I am right? Perfectly right, my dearest Harriet. You are doing just what you ought. While you were all in suspense, I kept my feelings to myself, but now that you are so completely decided, I have no hesitation in approving. Dear Harriet, I give myself joy of this. You have grieved me to lose your acquaintance, which must have been the consequence of your marrying Mr. Martin. While you were in the smallest degree wavering, I said nothing about him, because I would not influence, but it would have been the loss of a friend to me. I could not have visited Mr. Robert Martin of Abbey Mill Farm. Now I am secure of you forever. Harriet had not surmised her own danger, but the idea of it struck her forcibly. You could not have visited me, she cried, looking aghast. No, to be sure you could not have, but I never thought of that before. That would have been too dreadful. What an escape. Dear Miss Woodhouse, I would not give up the pleasure and honour of your being intimate, or the pleasure and honour of being intimate with you for anything in the world. Indeed, Harriet, it would have been a severe pang to lose you. It must have been. You would have thrown yourself out of all good society. I must have given you up. Dear me, how should I ever have borne it? It would have killed me never to come to Hartfield any more. Dear affectionate creature, you banished to Abbey Mill Farm, you confined to the society of the illiterate and vulgar all your life. I wonder how the young man could have the assurance to ask it. He must have a pretty good opinion of himself. I do not think he is conceited, either in general, said Harriet, her conscience opposing such censure. At least he is very good-natured. I shall always feel much obliged to him, and have a great regard for... But that's quite a different thing from... And you know, though he may like me, it does not follow that I should... And certainly, I must confess that my visiting here I have seen people, and if one comes to compare the person and manners, there is no comparison at all. One is so very handsome and agreeable. However, I do really think Mr. Martin a very amiable young man, and have a great opinion of him, and his being so much attached to me, and his writing such a letter. But as to my leaving you, it is what I would not do upon any consideration. Thank you. Thank you, my own sweet little friend. We will not be parted. A woman is not to marry a man merely because she is asked, or because he is attached to her and can write a tolerable letter. Oh no, and it is but a short letter too. Emma felt the bad taste of her friend, but let her pass with a very true, and it would be small consolation for her to the clownish manner. It would be small consolation to her, the clownish manner which might be offending her every hour of the day, to know that her husband could write a good letter. Oh, yes, very. Nobody cares for a letter. The thing is to be always happy with pleasant companions. I am quite determined to refuse him. But how shall I do? What shall I say? Emma assured her there would be no difficulty in the answer, and advised it being written directly, which she agreed to, in the hope of her assistance. And though Emma continued to protest against any assistance being wanted, it were in fact given in the formation of every sentence. The looking over of his letter again, in replying to it, had such a softening tendency that it was particularly necessary to brace her up with a few decisive expressions. And she was so very much concerned at the idea of making him unhappy, and thought so much of what his mother and sisters would think and say, and was so anxious that they should not fancy her ungrateful, that Emma believed if the young man had come in her way that moment, he would have been accepted after all. This letter, however, was written and sealed and sent. The business was finished, and Harriet safe. She was rather low all the evening, but Emma could allow for her amiable regrets, and sometimes relieved them by speaking of her own affection, sometimes by bringing forward the idea of Mr. Elton. I shall never be invited to Abbey Mill again, was said in rather a sorrowed tone. Nor if you were could I ever bear to part with you, my Harriet. You are a great deal too necessary at Hartfield to be spared in Abbey Mill. I am sure I should never want to go there, for I am never happy but at Hartfield. Some time afterwards it were, I think Mr. Goddard would be very much surprised if she knew, I think Mrs. Goddard would be very much surprised if she knew what had happened. I am sure Miss Nash would, and Miss Nastings, her own sister, very well married, and is only a linen draper. One should be sorry to see greater pride or refinement in the teacher of the school, Harriet. I dare say Miss Nash would envy you such an opportunity as this of being married. Even this conquest would appear valuable in her eyes. As to anything superior for you, I suppose she is quite in the dark. The attentions of a certain person can hardly be among the tittle-tattle of Highbury, yet hitherto I fancy you and I are the only people to whom his looks and manners have explained themselves. Harriet blushed and smiled, and said something about wondering that people should like her so much. The idea of Mr. Elton was certainly cheering, but still, after a time, she was tender-hearted again towards the rejected Mr. Martin. Now he has got my letter, she said softly. I wonder what they are all doing, whether his sisters know, if he is unhappy. They will be unhappy too. I hope he will not mind it so very much. Let us think of those among our absent friends who are more cheerfully employed, cried Emma. At this moment, perhaps, Mr. Elton is showing your picture to his mother and sisters, telling how much more beautiful is the original, and after being asked for it 5 or 6 times, allowing them to hear your name, your own dear name. My picture! But he has left my picture in Bond Street. Has he so? Then I know nothing of Mr. Elton. No, my dear little modest Harriet, depend upon it, that picture will not be in Bond Street till just before he mounts his horse tomorrow. It is his companion all this evening, his solace, his delight. It opens his design to his family. It introduces you among them. It diffuses through the party those pleasant feelings of our nature, eager curiosity and more prepossession. How cheerful, how animated, how suspicious, how busy their imaginations all are. Harriet smiled again, and her smile grew stronger. That's the end of chapter 7. I'll have a quick drink. Now, for all that Emma protests at not having any influence upon Harriet's choice there, it's pretty clear that she is more than a little influential over the matter, as it were. What else is there to be said? What else is there to be said, Lord? Well, she's quite dismissive too, and obviously the gentleman farmer who she dismissed out of hand surprised her with his ability in the writing of the fine letter, which, above anything, does show a degree of education which she dismissed in him. I suspect Harriet will come to regret her choices here, but, well, we can only wait and see, can't we? I'm holding off now because I'm fairly certain the ad break is about to start and I don't want to jump into the chapter immediately, if it is, but maybe I better add. Oh, no, there's the alarm, so it'll be starting in a minute. Okay, in that case I'll do a little thinking of how we proceed. There's a little bit of a burr in my throat, but it's not a bad one. Quick drink of water has taken care of most of it, so I think we'll press on at least one more chapter, maybe two. We'll see how we feel after the next one. Yeah. I don't think we'll press on much further after that, but well, we'll see how we feel. Maybe we'll go a little further. I'm not actually sure exactly how long the text is, but we are currently about 80 pages into it. Oh, we've got 430 pages, so a little shy of a quarter of the way through. Maybe that's what we'll aim for then, around a quarter of the way. Yeah, I'll check during the ad break, see how far that would need us to take, and then we'll make some calls. Maybe we won't push quite so far, but we'll see. Yeah, ad breaks. Oh, ads coming on now, so yeah. There we go. Okay, so I've had a look through it. People who aren't in the ads. Getting through the end of chapter 9 will put us at 107 pages read, which for a text of 430 pages is almost exactly a quarter of the way through. So that does seem a good target to me, at least to my mind. So we'll push for that. There should be 22 more pages, so we'll try and do 2 more chapters. I think I've got an idea of the shape of how things is going to turn out, but I'm not entirely sure, so we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to spoil things too much anyway. But, well, I don't know. What else is there to say of the thing then? I don't know. I'm struggling a bit with this one. It's not a bad book, I should say. It's one of those books where I'm struggling to find things to say about it. Like, it's a book that is, how'd you say? It's a book that does a good job of saying everything it wants to say in the text of it. Reminds me a bit of The Old Man and the Sea, like that. Like, there are undercurrents and subtleties that can be pointed out, but most of it is there on the page, and by pointing it out, you're just doing a less subtle job of what the author's already doing. It's a well put together text like that, but it does. You have a problem with a text like that when you're doing my job, because my whole point is to read and do a bit of commentary on it, and if there's nothing to comment on, it leaves me a bit on the lurch. I guess I could just read on, but I always feel bad if I just read a text and don't do anything with it. It feels like I should be contributing somehow. Well, I don't know what I could literally just be sitting here reading these if I had to. Like, these are all in the public domain. And they're good enough on their own to stand up, it just makes me feel a bit redundant, really. Nothing but a voice. I mean, I'm sure I'm a rat that can talk, the voice is important and impressive, but I'm also a rat that can think. It was like, I would be doing both of those things. Still. And I do have these minutes, these ad breaks to fill at the end. They annoy me. I want to turn them off sometimes, but I know that if you even turn them down, you get the pre-roll ads, which is annoying as well. So I don't know. Anyway, another quick swallow of water before the ads end there. There we are. And that should be ads over. So I'll press on. Planning to go through chapters 8 and 9, and that'll leave us about a quarter of the way through. So, chapter 8. Harriet slept at Hartfield that night. For some weeks past, she had been spending more than half her time there, and gradually getting to have a bedroom appropriated to herself. And Emma judged it best in every respect, safest and kindness, to keep her with them as much as possible just at present. She was obliged to go the next morning for an hour or two at Mr. Goddard's, but with that then to be settled that she should return to Hartfield, make a regular visit of some days. While she was gone, Mr. Knightley called, and sat some time with Mr. Woodhouse and Emma, till Mr. Woodhouse, who had previously made up his mind to walk out, was persuaded by his daughter not to defer it, and were induced by the entreaties of both, against the scruples of his own civility, to leave Mr. Knightley for that purpose. Mr. Knightley, who had nothing of ceremony about him, was offering by his short, decided answers, an amusing contrast to the protracted apologies and civil hesitations of the other. Well, I believe you will excuse me, Mr. Knightley, if you will not consider me doing a very rude thing. I shall take Emma's advice and go out for a quarter of an hour. As the sun is out, I believe I had better take my 3 turns while I can. I treat you without ceremony, Mr. Knightley. We invalids think we are privileged people. My dear sir, do not make a stranger of me. I leave an excellent substitute in my daughter. Emma will be happy to entertain you, and therefore I think I will beg your excuse and take my 3 turns, my winter walk. You cannot do better, sir. I would ask for the pleasure of your company, Mr. Knightley, but I am a very slow walker, and my pace would be tedious to you. And besides, you have another long walk before you, to Downwell Abbey. Thank you, sir, thank you. I am going this moment myself, and I think the sooner you go, the better. I will fetch your greatcoat and open the garden door for you. Mr. Woodhouse at last were off. Mr. Knightley, instead of being immediately off likewise, sat down again, seemingly inclined for more chat. He began speaking of Harriet, and speaking of her with more voluntary praise than Emma had ever heard before. I cannot rate her beauty as you do, he said, but she is a pretty little creature, and I am inclined to think very well of her disposition. Her character depends upon those she is with, but in good hands she will turn out a valuable woman. I am glad you think so, and the good hands, I hope, may not be wanting. Come, said he. You are anxious for a compliment, so I will tell you that you have improved her. You've cured her of her schoolgirl's giggle. She really does you credit. Thank you. I should be mortified indeed if I did not believe I had been of some use. It is not everybody who will bestow praise where they may. You don't often overpower me with it. You were expecting her again, you say, this morning? Almost every moment. She's been gone longer already than she intended. Something has happened to delay her. Some visitor, perhaps. High-breed gossips, tiresome wretches. Harriet may not consider everybody tiresome that you would. Emma knew this was too true for contradiction, and therefore said nothing. He presently added with a smile, I do not pretend to fix on times or places, but I must tell you that I have good reason to believe your little friend will soon hear of something to her advantage. Indeed? How so? Of what sort? A very serious sort, I assure you, still smiling. Very serious? I can think of but one thing. Who is in love with her? Who makes you their confidant? Emma were more than half in hopes of Mr. Elton's having dropped him in. Mr. Knightley were a sort of general friend and adviser, and she knew Mr. Elton looked up to him. I have reason to think, he replied, that Harriet Smith will soon have an offer of marriage, and from a most unexceptionable quarter. Robert Martin is the man. Our visit to Abbey Mill this summer seems to have done his business. He is desperately in love and means to marry her. He is very obliging, said Emma. But he is sure that Harriet means to marry him? Well, he means to make her an offer then. Will that do? He came to the Abbey 2 evenings ago on purpose to consult me about it. He knows I have thorough regard for him and all his family, and, I believe, consider me as one of his best friends. He came to ask me whether I thought it would be imprudent in him to settle so early, whether I thought her too young, in short, whether I approved of his choice altogether. Having some apprehensions, perhaps, of her being considered, especially since you making so much of her, as in a line of society above him. I was very much pleased with all that he said. I never hear better sense from anyone than Robert Martin. He always speaks to the purpose, open, straightforward, and very well judging. He told me everything, his circumstances and plans, and what they all proposed doing in the event of his marriage. He is an excellent young man, both as a son and brother. I had no hesitation in advising him to marry. He proved to me that he could afford it, and that being the case, I was convinced he could not do better. I praised the fair lady too, and altogether sent him away very happy. If he had never estimated my opinion before, he would have thought highly of me then. If he had never esteemed my opinion, I would have thought very highly of me then, and I dare say left the house thinking me the best friend and counsellor man ever had. This happened the night before last. Now, as we may fairly suppose, he would not allow much time to pass before he spoke to the lady, and he does not appear to have spoken yesterday. It is not unlikely that he should be at Miss Goodhart's today, and she may be detained by a visitor, without thinking him at all a tiresome wretch. Pray, Mr. Knightley, said Emma, who had been smiling to herself through a great part of the speech, how do you know that Mr. Martin did not speak yesterday? Certainly, replied he, surprised. I do not absolutely know it, but it may be inferred. Was not she the whole day with you? Come, she said, I will tell you something in return for what you have told me. He did speak yesterday. That is, he wrote and was refused. This were obliged to be repeated before it could be believed. Mr. Knightley actually looked red with surprise and displeasure as he stood up in tall indignation and said, And she is a greater simpleton than I ever believed her. What is the foolish girl about? Oh, to be sure, cried Emma. It is always incomprehensible to a man that a woman should ever refuse an offer of marriage. A man always imagines a woman should be ready for anybody who asks her. Nonsense! A man does not imagine any such thing. But what is the meaning of this? Harriet Smith refuses Robert Martin. Madness! If it is so, but I hope you are mistaken. I saw her answer. Nothing could be clearer. You saw her answer. You wrote her answer too, Emma. This is your doing. You persuaded her to refuse him. And if I did, which, however, I am far from allowing, I should not feel I had done wrong. Mr. Martin is a very respectable young man, but I cannot admit him to be Harriet's equal, and am rather surprised indeed that he should have ventured to address her. By your account, he does seem to have had some scruples. It is a pity that they were ever got over. Not Harriet's equal, exclaimed Mr. Knightley, loudly and warmly, with calm asperity, added a few moments afterwards. No, he is not her equal, indeed, for he is as much her superior in sense as in situation. Emma, your infatuation about that girl blinds you. What are Harriet Smith's claims, either of birth, nature, or education, to any connection higher than Robert Martin? She is the natural daughter of nobody knows whom, with probably no settled provision at all, and certainly no respectable relations. She is known only as a parlour boarder at a common school. She is not a sensible girl, nor a girl of any information. She has been taught nothing useful, and is too young and too simple to have acquired anything herself. At her age she can have no experience. With her little wit, is not very likely ever to have any that can avail her. She is pretty, and she is good-tempered, and that is all. My only scruple in advising the match was on his account, as being beneath his deserts, and a bad connection for him. I felt that, as to fortune, in all probability, he might do much better, and that, as to a rational companion or useful helpmate, he could do no worse, or he could not do worse. But I could not reason so to a man in love, and he was willing to trust that there being no harm in her, to having that sort of disposition which, in good hands like his, might be easily led aright and turn out very well. The advantage of the match I felt to be all on her side, and had not the smallest doubt, nor have I now, that there would be a general cry out about her extreme good luck. Even your satisfaction I made sure of. It crossed my mind immediately that you would not regret your friend's leaving Highbury for the sake of her having settled so well. I remember saying to myself, even Emma, with all her partiality for Harriet, will think this a good match. I cannot wonder at your knowing so little of Harriet as to say such a thing. What? Think a farmer, and with all his sense and all his merit, Mr. Martin is nothing more, as a good match for my intimate friend? Not regret her leaving Highbury for the sake of marrying a man whom I could never admit as an acquaintance of my own? I wonder you should think it possible for me to have such feelings. I assure you mine are very different. I must think your statement by no means fair. You are not just to Harriet's claims. They would be estimated very differently by others as well as myself. Mr. Martin may be the richest of the two, but he is undoubtedly her inferior as to rank in society. The sphere in which she moves is much above his. It would be a degradation to illegitimacy and ignorance to be married to a respectable, intelligent gentleman farmer. As to the circumstances of her birth, though in a legal sense she may be called nobody, it will not hold in common sense. She is not to pay for the offence of others by being held below the level of those with whom she is brought up. There can scarcely be a doubt that her father is a gentleman, and a gentleman of fortune. Her allowance is very liberal. Nothing has ever been grudged for her improvement or comfort. That she is a gentleman's daughter is indubitable to me. That she associates with gentlemen's daughters, no one, I apprehend, will deny. She is superior to Mr. Robert Martin. Whoever might be her parents, said Mr. Knightley, whoever may have had the charge of her, it does not appear to have been any part of their plan to introduce her into what you would call good society. After receiving a very indifferent education, she is left in Mrs. Goddard's hands to shift as she can, to move, in short, in Mrs. Goddard's line, to have Mrs. Goddard's acquaintance. Her friends evidently thought this good enough for her, and was good enough, and it was good enough. She desired nothing better herself. Till you chose to turn her into a friend, her mind had no desire for her own set, nor any ambition beyond it. She was happy as possible with the Martins in the summer. She had no sense of superiority then. If she has it now, you have given it. You have been no friend to Harriet Smith, Emma. Robert Martin would never have proceeded so far if he had not felt persuaded of her not being disinclined to him. I know him well. He has too much real feeling to address any woman on the haphazard or selfish passion. And as to conceit, he is the farthest from it of any man I know. Depend upon it, he had encouragement. It was most convenient, though, Emma, not to make a direct reply to this assertion. She chose rather to take up her own line of the subject again. You are a very warm friend to Mr. Martin, but, as I have said before, are unjust to Harriet. Harriet's claims to marry well are not so contemptible as you represent them. She is not a clever girl, but she has better sense than you are aware of, and does not deserve to have her understanding spoken of so slightly. Waiving that point, however, and supposing her to be, as you describe her, only pretty and good-natured, let me tell you that in the degree she possesses them, they are not trivial recommendations to the world in general, for she is, in fact, a beautiful girl, and must be thought so by 99 people out of 100. Until it appears that men are much more philosophic on the subject of beauty than they generally suppose, till they do fall in love with well-informed minds instead of handsome faces, a girl with such loveliness as Harriet has certainty of being admired and sought after, of having the power of choosing from among many, consequently a claim to be nice. Her good nature, too, is not so very slight a claim, comprehending as it does real, thorough sweetness of temper and manner, a very humble opinion of herself, and a great readiness to be pleased with other people. I am very much mistaken if your sex in general would not think such beauty and such temper the highest claims a woman could possess. Upon my word, Emma, to hear you abusing the reason you have is almost enough to make you think so too. Better be without sense than misapply it as you do. To be sure, cried she playfully, I know that is the feeling of you all. I know that such a girl as Harriet is exactly what every man delights in, what at once bewitches his senses and satisfies his judgment. Oh, Harriet may pick and choose. Were you yourself ever to marry, she is the very woman for you. And is she at 17, just entering into life, just beginning to be known, to be wondered at because she does not accept the first offer she receives? No. Pray let her have time to look about her. I always thought it a very foolish intimacy, said Mr. Knightley presently, though I have kept my thoughts to myself. But I now perceive that it would be a very unfortunate one for Harriet. It will puff her up with such ideas of her own beauty, and of what she has to claim to, that in a little while nobody within her reach will be good enough for her. Vanity working on a weak head produces every sort of mischief. Nothing so easy as for a young lady to raise her expectations too high. Miss Harriet Smith may not find offers of marriage flow in so fast, though she is a very pretty girl. Men of sense, whatever you may choose to say, do not want silly wives. Men of family would not be very fond of connecting themselves with a girl of such obscurity, and most prudent men would be afraid of the inconvenience and disgrace they might be involved in when the mystery of her parentage came to be revealed. Let her marry Robert Martin, and she is safe, respectable, and happy forever. But if you encourage her to expect to marry greatly, and teach her to be satisfied with nothing less than a man of consequence and large fortune, she may be a parlour boarder at Mrs. Goddard's all the rest of her life. Or at least, Harriet Smith is a girl who will marry somebody or other, till she grows desperate and is glad to catch the old writing master's son. We think so very differently on this point, Mr. Knightley, that there can be no use in canvassing it. We shall only be making each other more angry. But as to my letting her marry Robert Martin, it is impossible. She has refused him, and so decidedly, I think, as must prevent any second application. She must abide by the evil of having refused him, whatever it may be, and as to the refusal itself, I will not pretend to say that I might not influence her a little, but I assure you there was very little for me, or for anybody else to do. His appearance is so much against him, and his manner so bad, and if she ever were disposed to favour him, she is not now. I can imagine that before she had seen anybody superior, she might tolerate it. He was the brother of her friends, and he took pains to please her, and altogether, having seen nobody better, that must have been his great assistant, she might not, while she was at Abbey Mill, find him disagreeable. The case is altered now. She knows now what gentlemen are, and nothing but a gentleman in education and manner has any chance with Harriet. Nonsense, arrant nonsense, as ever was talked, cried Mr. Knightley. Robert Martin's manners have sense, sincerity, and good humour to recommend them, and his mind has more true gentility than Harriet Smith could understand. Emma made no answer, and tried to look cheerfully unconcerned, but really feeling uncomfortable, and wanting him very much to be gone. She did not repent what she had done. She still thought herself a better judge of such points of female right and refinement than he could be, but yet she had a sort of habitual respect for his judgment in general, which made her dislike having it so loudly against her. To have him sitting just opposite to her in an angry state were very disagreeable. Some minutes passed in this unpleasant silence, with only one attempt on Emma's side to talk of the weather, but he made no answer. He was thinking. The result of his thoughts appeared at last in these words: Robert Martin has no great loss, if he can but think so, and I hope it will not be long before he does. Your views for Harriet are best known to yourself, but as you make no secret of your love of matchmaking, it is fair to suppose that views and plans and projects you have. And as a friend I shall just hint to you that if Elton is the man, I think it will all be labour in vain. Emma laughed and exclaimed. He continued, Depend upon it, Elton will not do. Elton is a very good sort of man, and a very respectable vicar of Highbury, but not at all likely to make an imprudent match. He knows the value of a good income as well as anybody. Elton may talk sentimentally, but he will act rationally. He is as well acquainted with his own claims as you can be with Harriet's. He knows that he is a very handsome young man, and a great favourite wherever he goes. And from his general way of talking in unreserved moments, when there are only men present, I am convinced that he does not mean to throw himself away. I have heard him speak with great animation of a large family of young ladies that his sisters are intimate with, of all £20,000 apiece. I am very much obliged to you, said Emma, laughing again. If I had set my heart on Mr. Elton marrying Harriet, It would have been very kind to open my eyes, but at present I only want to keep Harriet to myself. I have done with matchmaking, indeed. I can never hope to equal my own doing at Randall's. I shall leave off while I am well. Good morning to you, he said, rising and walking off abruptly. He was very much vexed. He felt the disappointment of the young man, and was mortified to have been the means of promoting it by the sanction he had given and the part which he would persuaded Emma had taken in the affair. By the sanction he had given, and the part which he would persuaded Emma had taken in the affair, were provoking him exceedingly. Emma remained in a state of vexation too, but there was more indistinctness in the causes of hers than in his. She did not always feel so absolutely satisfied with herself, so entirely convinced that her opinions were right and her adversaries wrong, as Mr. Knightley. He walked off in more complete self-approbation than he left for her. She was not so materially cast down, however, but that little time and the return of Harriet were very adequate restoratives. Harriet staying away so long was beginning to make her uneasy. The possibility of the young man's coming to Mrs. Goddard's that morning and meeting with Harriet and pleading his own case gave alarming ideas. The dread of such a failure after all became the prominent uneasiness. When Harriet appeared, and in very good spirits, and without having any such reason to give for a long absence, she felt a satisfaction which settled her with her own mind, and convinced her that, let Mr. Knightley think or say what he would, she had done nothing which woman's friendship and woman's feeling would not justify. He had frightened her a little about Mr. Elton. When she considered that Mr. Knightley could not have observed him as she had done, neither with the interest, nor, she must be allowed to tell herself, in spite of Mr. Knightley's pretensions, with the skill of such an observer on such a question as herself, he had spoken hastily and in anger. She was able to believe that he had rather said what he wished resentfully to be true than what he knew anything about. He certainly might have heard Mr. Elton speak with more unreserve than she had ever done, and Mr. Elton might not be an imprudent, inconsiderate disposition as to money matters. He might naturally be rather attentive than otherwise to them. But then Mr. Knightley did not make due allowances for the influence of a strong passion at war with all interested motives. Mr. Knightley saw no such passion, and of course thought nothing of its effects. But she saw too much of it to feel a doubt of its overcoming with any hesitation that reasonable prudence might originally suggest. And more than a reasonable becoming degree of prudence, she was very sure did not belong to Mr. Elton. Harriet's cheerful look and manner established hers. She come back, not to think of her Mr. Martin, but to talk of Mr. Elton. Miss Nash had been telling her something, which she repeated immediately with great delight. Mr. Perry had been to Mrs. Goddard's to attend a sick child, and Miss Nash had seen him, and he had told Miss Nash that as he were coming back yesterday from Clavden Park, he had met Mr. Elton, and found, to his great surprise, that Mr. Elton were actually on his road to London, and not meaning to return till the morrow, though it was a whist club night, which he had never been known to miss before. And Mr. Perry had remonstrated with him about it, and told him how shabby it was in him, their best player, to absent himself, and tried very much to persuade him to put off his journey only one day. But it would not do. Mr. Elton had been determined to go on, and had said in a very particular way indeed, that he would go on business which he would not put off for any inducement in the world. And something about the very enviable commission, and being the bearer of something exceedingly precious. Mr. Perry could not quite understand him, but he was very sure that it must be a lady in the case, and he told him so, and Mr. Elton only looked very conscious and smiling, and rode off in great spirits. Miss Nash had told her all this, and had talked a great deal more about Mr. Elton, and said, looking so very significantly at her, that she did not pretend to understand what his business might be, that she only knew that any woman whom Mr. Elton could prefer, she should think the luckiest woman in the whole world. But beyond a doubt, Mr. Elton had not his equal in beauty or agreeableness. That's the end of chapter 8. That ran a little bit longer than the other ones. I'll have a quick drink. But I've got to say, that is the sort of chapter that I personally always want from a Regency. You've got two people, both of them are very impassionately engaged in the subject, getting into a vicious argument, all in the sort of bounds of propriety. That's a good one. I like that. I'm actually sort of torn on how to call it, really. I mean, obviously, we've seen Emma do some pretty questionable things, but at the same time, there's a certain point of, you know, the sort of confidence of women, and I don't know. Mr. Knightley seems like a sensible and sort of stolid sort of man, but at the same time, I don't know. He seems also very sure of himself in a way that can sometimes be a poor indication of actual sense. So I'm not entirely sure. But that said, I did very much enjoy the argument. I love it when two people are very clearly furious, but in a situation where they can't just properly yell and sort of harangue one another. It's the best sort of fun. Yeah. What else is there to say then? I don't think much else really. So yeah, I'll rather than pressing on, I shall, well, or rather than saying any more, I shall press on with chapter 9, which I think is maybe a little shorter, but not much shorter than that one. We'll see. I'll have another quick swallow of water, just because I am a little dry, and this will be our last one. So, hope you're sitting comfortably. Wow. Chapter 9. Mr. Knightley might quarrel with her, but Emma could not quarrel with herself. She was so much displeased that it were longer than usual before he come. He was so much displeased that it were longer than usual before he come to Hartfield again. And when they did meet, his grave look showed that she were not forgiven. She was sorry, but could not repent. On the contrary, her plans and proceedings were more and more justified, and endeared to her by the general appearances of the next few days. The picture, elegantly framed, comes safely to hand soon after Mr. Elton's return, and being hung over the mantelpiece of the common sitting room, he got up to look at it, and sighed out his half sentences of admiration, just as he ought. And as for Harriet's feelings, they were visibly forming themselves into as strong and steady an attachment as her youth and sort of mind admitted. Yeah. Emma was soon perfectly satisfied at Mr. Martin's being no otherwise remembered than as he furnished a contrast with Mr. Elton, the utmost advantage to the latter. Her views of improving her little friend's mind by a great deal of useful reading and conversation, and never yet laid to more than a few first chapters, and the intention of going on tomorrow. It were much easier to chat than to study, much pleasanter to let her imagination range and work at Harriet's fortune, and to be labouring to enlarge her comprehension or exercise it on sober facts. And the only literary pursuit in which engaged Harriet at present, the only mental provision she were making for the evening of her life, was the collecting and transcribing all the riddles of every sort that she could meet with into a thin quarter of hot pressed paper, made up by a friend and ornamented with ciphers and trophies. In this age of literature, such collections on very grand scale are not uncommon. Miss Nash, head teacher at Mrs. Goddard's, had written out at least 300, and Harriet, who had taken the first hint of it from her, hoped, with Miss Woodhouse's help, to get a great many more. Emma assisted with her invention, memory, and taste. And as Harriet wrote a very pretty hand, it were likely to be an arrangement of the first order, in form as well as quantity. Mr. Woodhouse were almost as much interested in the business as the girls, and tried very often to recollect something worth their putting in. So many clever riddles as there used to be when he was young, he wondered if he couldn't remember them, but he hoped he should in time, and it always ended in Kitty, a fair but frozen maid. His good friend Perry, too, whom he had spoken on the subject, did not at present recollect anything of the riddle, but desired Perry to be upon the watch, and as he went about so much, something he thought might come from that quarter. It was by no means his daughter's wish that the intellect of Arbery in general should be put under requisition. Mr. Elton were the only one whose assistance she asked. He were invited to contribute any really good enigmas, charades, or conundrums that he might recollect, and she had the pleasure of seeing him most intently at work with his recollections. At the same time, as she could perceive, most earnestly careful that nothing ungallant, nothing that did not breathe a compliment to the sex should pass his lips. They owed to him their 2 or 3 politest puzzles, and the joy and exultation with which at last he recalled, and rather sentimentally recited, that well-known charade. My first doth affliction denote, which my second is destined to feel, and my whole is the best antidote, that affliction to soften and heal. Made her quite sorry to acknowledge that they had transcribed it some pages ago already. Why will you not write one yourself for us, Mr. Elton? Said she. That is the only security of its freshness, and nothing could be easier to you. Oh no, he had never written, hardly ever, anything of the kind in his life. The stupidest fellow. You're afraid not even Miss Woodhouse, he stopped a moment, or Miss Smith could inspire him. The very next day, however, produced some proof of his inspiration. He called a few moments, just to leave a piece of paper on the table, containing, as he said, a charade which a friend of his had addressed to a young lady, the object of his admiration, but which, from his manner, Emma were immediately convinced must be his own. I do not offer it for Miss Smith's collection, said he. Being my friends, I have no right to expose it in any degree to the public eye, but perhaps you may not dislike looking at it. The speech was more to Emma than to Harriet, which Emma could understand. There was a deep consciousness about him, and he found it easier to meet her eye than her friends. We had gone the next moment, after another moment's pause. Take it, said Emma, smiling, and pushing the paper towards Harriet. It is for you. Take your own. But Harriet were in a tremor, and could not touch it, and Emma, never loath to be first, were obliged to examine it herself. To Miss Charade. My first displays the wealth and pomp of kings, lords of the earth, their luxury and ease. Another view of man my second brings. Behold him there, the monarch of the seas. But united, what reverse we have! Man's boasted power and freedom all have flown. Lord of the earth and sea, he bends a slave, and woman, lovely woman, reigns alone. Their ready wit the word will soon supply. May its approval beam in that soft eye. She cast her eye over it, pondered, caught the meaning, read it through again to be quite certain, and quite mistress of the lines, and then passing to Harriet, sat happily smiling, and saying to herself, where Harriet was puzzling over the paper in all the confusion of hope and dullness, Very well, Mr. Elton, very well indeed. I have read worse charades. Courtship, a very good hint. I give you credit for it. This is feeling your way. This is saying very plainly, Pray, Miss Smith, give me leave to pay my address to you. Approve my charade and my intentions in the same glance. May its approval beam in that soft eye. Harriet, exactly. Soft is the very word for her eye. Of all epithets, it is the justest that could be given. Their ready wit the world will soon supply. Humph, Harriet's ready wit. All the better. A man must be very much in love indeed to describe her so. Ah, Mr. Knightley, I wish you had the benefit of this. I think this would convince you. For once in your life you would be obliged to own yourself mistaken. An excellent charade indeed, and very much to the purpose. Things must come to a crisis soon now. So you were obliged to break off from the very pleasant observations which were otherwise foresought to run into great length, by the eagerness of Harriet's wondering questions. What can it be, Miss Woodhouse? What can it be? I have not an idea. I cannot guess at the least. What could it possibly be? Do try to find out, Miss Woodhouse. Do help me. I never saw anything so hard. Is it kingdom? I wonder who the friend was, and who could be the young lady? You think it is a good one? Can it be woman? And woman, lovely woman, reigns alone. Can it be Neptune? Behold him there, the monarch of the seas. Or Trident? Or a mermaid? Or a shark? Oh no, shark is only one syllable. It must be very clever, or he would not have brought it. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, do you think we shall ever find out? Mermaids and sharks? Nonsense, my dear Harriet. What are you thinking of? Where would be the use of him bringing us a charade made by a friend upon a mermaid or a shark? Give me the paper and listen. For Miss, read Miss Smith. My first displays the wealth and pomp of kings, lords of the earth, their luxury and ease. At his court, another view of man my second brings. Behold him this monarch, the monarch of the seas. At his ship, plain as can be. Now for the cream. But united, courtship, you know, what reverse we have? Man's boasted power and freedom all are flown. Lord of the earth and sea, he bends a slave, and woman, lovely woman, reigns alone. A very proper compliment. And then follows the application, which I think, my dear Harriet, you cannot find much difficulty in comprehending. Read it in comfort to yourself. There can be no doubt of its being written for you and to you. Harriet could not long resist so delightful a persuasion. She read the concluding lines, and were all aflutter and happiness. She could not speak, but she would not want it to speak. It were enough for her to feel. Emma spoke for her. There is so pointed and so particular a meaning in this compliment, says she, that I cannot have a moment's doubt as to Mr. Elton's intentions. You are his object, and he will soon receive the completest proof of it. I thought it must be so. I thought I could not be so deceived. Now it is clear. The state of his mind is as clear and decided as my wishes on the subject have been ever since I knew you. Yes, Harriet, just so long as I have been waiting for the very circumstance to happen which has happened. I could never tell whether an attachment between you and Mr. Elton were most desirable or most natural. Its probability and its eligibility have really so equalled each other. I am very happy. I congratulate you, my dear Harriet, with all my heart. This is an attachment which a woman may well feel pride in creating. This is a connection which offers nothing but good. It will give you everything that you want: consideration, indemnation, independence, a proper home. It will fix you in the centre of all your real friends, close to Hartfield and to me, and confirm our intimacy forever. This, Harriet, is an alliance which can never raise a blush in either of us. Dear Miss Woodhouse, and dear Miss Woodhouse were all that Harriet, with so many tender embraces, could articulate at first. When they did arrive at something like conversation, it was sufficiently clear to her friend that she saw, felt, anticipated, and remembered, just as she ought, Mr. Elton's superiority and very ample acknowledgment there. Whatever you say is always right, cried Harriet, and therefore I suppose, and believe, and hope it must be so. But otherwise I could not have imagined it. It is so much beyond anything I desire, Mr. Elton, who might marry anybody. There cannot be two opinions about him. He is so very superior. Only think of those sweet verses. To Miss. Dear me, how clever. Could it really be meant for me? I cannot make a question or listen to a question about that. It is a certainty. Receive it on my judgment. It is a sort of prologue to the play, a motto to the chapter, and will be soon followed by a matter-of-fact prose. It is a sort of thing which nobody could have expected. I am sure a month ago I had no more idea myself. The strangest things do take place. When Miss Smiths and Mrs. Eltons get acquainted, they do indeed. And really it is strange. It is out of the common course, that which is so evidently, so palpably desirable. What causes the prearrangement of other people should so immediately shape itself into the proper form. You and Mr. Elton are by situation called together. You belong to one another by every circumstance of your respective homes. Your marrying will be equal to the match of the Randalls. There does seem to be something in the air of Hartfield which gives love exactly the right direction, and sends it into the very channel where it ought to flow. The course of true love never did run smooth. A Hartfield edition of Shakespeare would have a long note on that passage. That Mr. Elton should really be in love with me, me of all people who did not know him to speak of him, and Michaelmas, and he the very handsomest man that ever was, and the man that everybody looks up to, quite like Mr. Knightley. His company so sought after that everybody says he need not eat a single meal by himself if he does not choose it, that he has more invitations than there are days in the week. And so excellent, isn't it? And so excellent. In the church, Miss Nass has put down all the texts he ever preached from since he came to Highbury. Dear me, when I look back to the first time I saw him, how little did I think. The two abbots and I ran to the front of the room and peeped through the blinds when we heard he was going by, and Miss Nash came and scolded us away and said to look through herself, and stayed to look through herself, though she called me back presently and let me look too, which was very good-natured. And how beautiful we thought he looked. He was arm in arm with Mr. Cole. This is an alliance which, whatever your friends may be, must be agreeable to them, provided at least they have common sense. And we are not to be addressing our conduct to fools. If they are anxious to see you happily married, here is a man whose amiable character gives every assurance of it. If they wish to have you settled in the same country and circle which they have chosen to place you in, here it will be accomplished. And if their only object is that you should, in the common set phrase, be well married, here is the comfortable fortune, the respectable establishment, the rise in the world which must satisfy them. Yes, very true. How nicely you talk. I love to hear you. You understand everything. You and Mr. Elton are one as clever as the other. This charade. If I had studied a 12-month, I could never have made a thing like it. I thought he meant to try his skill by his manner of declining it yesterday. I do think it is, without exception, the best charade I ever read. I never read one more to the purpose, certainly. It is as long again as almost all we have had before. I do not consider its length as particularly in its favour. Such things in general cannot be too short. Harriet was too intent on the lines to err. The most satisfactory comparisons were rising in her mind. It is one thing, said she presently, her cheeks in a glow, to have a very good sense in a common way, like everybody else, and if there is anything to say, to sit down and write a letter, and say just what was meant, what you must, in a short way, and another to write verses and charades like this. Emma could not have desired a more spirited rejection of Mr. Martin's prose. Such sweet lines, continued Harriet, these two last. But how shall I ever be able to return the paper, or say I have found it out? Oh, Miss Woodhouse, what can we do about that? Leave it to me. You do nothing. He'll be here this evening, I dare say, and then I will give it him back, and some nonsense or other will pass between us, and you shall not be committed. Your soft eyes shall choose their own time for beaming. Trust to me. Oh, Miss Woodhouse, what a pity I must not write this beautiful charade into my book. I am sure I have not got one half so good. Leave out the last two lines, and there is no reason why you should not write it into your book. Oh, but those two lines are the best of all, granted, for private enjoyment, and for private enjoyment keep them. They are not all the less written, you know, because you divide them. The couple does not cease to be, nor does its meaning change. Take it away, and all appropriation ceases, and a very pretty, gallant charade remains, fit for any collection. Depend upon it, he would not like to have his charade slighted, much better than his passion. A poet in love must be encouraged in both capacities, or neither. Give me the book, and I will write it down, and then there can be no possible reflection on you. Harriet submitted, though her mind could hardly separate the parts, just to feel quite sure that her friend were not writing down a declaration of love. It seemed too precious an offering for any degree of publicity. I shall never let that book go out of my hands, says she. Very well, replied Emma. A most natural feeling, and the longer it lasts, the better. I shall be pleased. But here is my father coming. You will not object to my reading the charade to him. It will be giving him so much pleasure. He loves anything of the sort, and especially anything that plays woman a compliment. He has the tenderest spirit of gallantry towards us all. You must let me read it to him. Harriet looked grave. My dear Harriet, you must not refine too much upon this charade. You will betray your feelings improperly if you are too conscious and too quick, and appear to affix more meaning, or even quite all the meaning which may be affixed to it. Do not be overpowered by such a little tribute of admiration. If he had been anxious for secrecy, he would not have left the paper while I was by, but he rather pushed it towards me than towards you. Do not let us be too solemn on the business. He has encouragement enough to proceed without our signing out our souls over this charade. Oh no, I hope I shall not be ridiculous about it, as you please. Mr. Woodhouse come in, and very soon led to the subject again by the recurrence of his very frequent inquiry of, Well, my dears, how does your book go? Have you got anything fresh? Yes, Papa, we have something to read you, something quite fresh. A piece of paper was found on the table this morning, dropped, we suppose, by a fairy, containing a very pretty charade, and we have just copied it in. She read it to him, just as he liked to have anything read, slowly and distinctly, and 2 or 3 times over, with explanations of every part as she proceeded. We were very much pleased, and, as she had foreseen, especially struck with a complimentary conclusion. Ah, that's just, indeed. That's very properly said, very true. Woman, lovely woman, that is such a pretty charade, my dear, that I can easily guess what fairy brought it. Nobody could have written so prettily but you, Emma. Emma only nodded and smiled. After a little thinking and a very tender sigh, he added, Ah, it is no difficulty to see who you take after. Your dear mother was so clever at all things. If I had but her memory, but I can remember nothing, nor even that particular riddle which you have heard me mention. I can only reflect the first stanza, and there are several. Kitty, a fair but frozen maid, kindled a flame I yet deplore. The hoodwinked boy I called to aid, though of his near approach afraid, so failed to my suit before. And that is all I can recollect of it. But it's very clever all the way through. But I think, my dear, you said you had got it. Yes, Papa, it is written on our second page. We copied it from the elegant extract. It was Garrett's, you know. Ah, very true. Wish I could recollect more of it. Kitty, a fair but frozen maid. The name makes me think of poor Isabella. She was very near being christened Catherine after her grandma. I hope we shall have her here next week. Have you thought, my dear, where you should put her, and what room there will be for her children? Oh, yes. She will have her own room, of course. The room she always has. And there's the nursery for the children, just as usual, you know. Why should there be any change? Oh, I do not know, my dear. It is so long since she was here. Not since last Easter, and then only for a few days. Mr. John Knightley's being a lawyer is very inconvenient. Poor Isabella. She's sadly taken away from us all, and how sorry she will be when she comes not to see Mrs. Taylor here. She will not be surprised, Papa, at least. I do not know, my dear. I'm sure I was very much surprised when I first heard she was going to be married. You must ask Mr. and Mrs. Weston to dine with us while Isabella is here. Yes, my dear, if there is time, but in a very depressed tone. She's coming only for 1 week. There will not be time for anything. It is unfortunate they cannot stay longer. It seems a case of necessity. Mr. John Knightley must be in town again on the 28th, and we ought to be thankful, Papa, that we are to have the whole of the time they can give to the country. That 2 or 3 days are not to be taken for the Abbey. Mr. Knightley promises to give up his claims this Christmas. Though you know it is longer since they were with him than with us. It would be very hard indeed, my dear, if poor Isabella were to be anywhere but at Hartfield. Mr. Woodhouse could never allow for Mr. Knightley's claims on his brother, or anybody's claims on Isabella except his own. He sat musing a little while, and then said, But I do not see why poor Isabella should be obliged to go back so soon, though he does. I think, Emma, I shall try and persuade her to stay longer with us. She and the children might stay very well. Ah, Papa, that is what you have never been able to accomplish. I do not think you ever will. Isabella cannot bear to stay behind her husband. This were too true for contradiction. Unwelcome as it were, Mr. Woodhouse could only give a submissive sigh. As Emma saw his spirits affected by the idea of his daughter's attachment to her husband, she immediately led to such a branch of the subject as must raise them. Harriet must give as much of her company as she can while my brother and sister are here. I am sure she will be pleased with the children. We are very proud of the children, are we not, Papa? I wonder which she will think the handsomest, Henry or John. Aye, I wonder which she will. Poor little dears, how glad they will be to come. They are very fond of being at Hartfield, Harriet. I dare say they are, sir. I'm sure I do not know who is not. Henry is a fine boy, but John is very like his mamma. Henry is the eldest. He was named after me, not after his father. John the second is named after his father. Some people are surprised. I believe the eldest was not. But Isabella would have him called Henry, which I thought very pretty of her. And he is a very clever boy indeed. They're all remarkably clever, and they have so many pretty ways. They would come by and stand at my chair and say, Grandpa, can you give me a bit of string? And once Henry asked me for a knife, but I told him knives are only made for grandpapas. I think my father is too rough with them very often. He appears rough to you, said Emma, because you are so very gentle yourself. But if you could compare him with other papas, you would not think him rough. He wishes his boys to be active and handy, and if they misbehave, he can give them a sharp word now and then. But he is an affectionate father. Certainly Mr. John Knightley is an affectionate father. The children are all fond of him. And then their uncle comes in and tosses them up to the ceiling in a very frightening way. But they like it, Papa. There is nothing they like so much. It is such an enjoyment to them that if their uncle did not lay down the rule of their taking turns, whichever began would never give way to the other. Well, I cannot understand it. That is the case with us all, Papa. One half of the world cannot understand the pleasures of the other. Later in the morning, and just as the girls was going to separate in preparation for regular 4 o'clock dinner, the hero of this inimitable charade walked in again. Harriet turned away, but Emma could receive him with the usual smile, and her quick eye soon discerned in his consciousness of having made a push, of having thrown a dart, and she imagined he would come to see how it might turn up. His ostensible reason, however, was to ask whether Mr. Woodhouse's party could be made up in the evening without him, or whether he should be in the smallest degree necessary at Hartfield. If he were, everything else must give way, but otherwise his friend Cole had been saying so much about his dining with him, and made such a point of it that he had promised him conditionally to come. Emma thanked him, but could not allow on his disappointing his friend on their account. Her father was sure of his rubber. He re-urged, she re-declined, and he seemed then about to make his bow, when taking the paper from the table she returned it. "Oh, here's the charade you were so obliging as to leave with me. Thank you for the sight of it. We admired it so much that I have ventured to write it into Miss Smith's collection. Your friend will not take it amiss, I hope. Of course I have not transcribed beyond the 8th first lines." Mr. Elton certainly did not very well know what to say. He looked rather doubtingly, rather confused, said something about humour, glanced at Emma and at Harriet, and then seeing the book open on the table, took it up and examined it very attentively. With a view of passing off an awkward moment, Emma smilingly said, "You must make my apologies to your friend, but so good a charade must not be confined to one or two. You may be sure of every woman's approbation while he writes with such gallantry." "I have no hesitation in saying," replied Mr. Elton, though hesitating a good deal while he spoke, "I have no hesitation in saying, at least if my friend feels at all as I do, I have not the smallest doubt that could he see his little effusion on him, as I see it," looking at the book again and replacing it on the table, "he would consider it as the proudest moment of his life." After this speech he was gone as soon as possible. Emma could not think of it too soon, for with all his good and agreeable qualities, there was a sort of parade in his speeches which were very apt to incline her to laugh. She ran away to indulge the inclination, leaving the tender and the sublime pleasure to Harriet's share. That's the end of chapter 9, and where we shall be calling it for the night. I'll move back over to my room to do a little bit of last commentary. So, as is pretty plainly evidenced, well, the charade shows he has certain interest, although it does not seem as clear-cut to me as it does to Emma, to whom the interest is addressed. And I think there's rather a significant indication that he is addressed rather to Emma herself than to Harriet. But of course, it's still subtle enough that there could be confusion in either case, and I might be wrong. But I do not think things are going to end up well in the particular case, especially given the sort of explicit denial by Knightley of Mr. Elton being satisfied with a lower marriage. But while Harriet herself is of a lower birth and the sort of natural-born daughter, Emma is of, I think, a fairly good family, at least by the standards of country nobility. I think implied to at least be the best in the village, but she's said to have no company who's her equal, near and abouts. So, things is likely to go awry, but that will be for next week to find out. But yeah, with that I think we're about a quarter of the way through the book, so I suspect it will take us 8, maybe 9 readings, depending on how we go. Maybe 7 if we get into it one night, but yeah. I think that's about all I have to say on the matter without doing speculations that might spoil the coming chapters. So, with that, I shall thank you all for having come with me here tonight. I'll check to see if there's anyone live who I could bring. No one I really know, so I shall have to end things the old-fashioned way. But as always, I do very much thank you all for stopping by. Both Abbe for once again showing up first and strongest, and for Wild, who so dedicated to lurking that she come back twice after in position to Twitch. And I even give a mild thank you to the terrible bot who I had to kill midway through, because she still had my stats, and the numbers make me feel good, even though they don't mean anything and are badly recorded. But yeah, thank you all for coming by. I hope you've enjoyed our reading, and I hope you will continue to enjoy it in the days to come, or the weeks to come I should say. I mean, I'll still be reading in the days to come, but it won't be of Emma. I thank you all very much, and I hope you have a lovely day, morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is for you, and that it all goes well. As always, I thank you very kindly for showing up, and I bid you ta-ra.